welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Connect, and my co-host is Scott Strasser.
Hi, Jason. Welcome back home. How's it going?
It's good. I'm just trying to still get over a bit of jet lag here. I've been waking up the last couple mornings at about 4 a.m. because I think my body still thinks it's on a different time zone.
Well, no, it's good to have you back. Obviously, we didn't run an episode last week. And the week before that, we ran a truncated episode with just a quick discussion and then interview that we had actually done the week before. But it's good to get back into the routine and the swing of things. And it's good timing because, of course, we've got lots of soccer just ahead of us here.
Oh, yeah, there's been a lot going on. I've tried to keep up when I can over the last couple of weeks. And yeah, there's been a lot of news coming up for sure. So yeah, no shortage of topics today.
Absolutely. I'm excited to dive into it.
All right. Well, in this week's episode, we're going to talk about some updates with Cavalry going into their first match of the year. And we're going to talk about some new signings and new things that have been happening with the Calgary Wild. Also, a few other notes about Kaylee Hunter playing for Canada, some CMSA stuff, other player signings, a whole bunch of things we'll include. And we have an interview this week, Scott.
Yeah, we had an interview a few days ago with Tommy Wheeldon Jr., head coach of Cavalry FC. It was great to catch up with him for the first time in quite a while that he's been able to come on the podcast. But yeah, we interviewed him about the off-season, the preseason, the trip to Mexico to take on Pumas, and 2025 campaign, which is getting underway very soon, Saturday.
So let's transition over, and we'll start getting into our Cavalry FC segment and preview the season and this weekend's match.
This is Tommy Wheeldon Jr., and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So, Scott, it seems like it's been a while, but we're finally going to get some CPL action here happening on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, it's been 5 months since that historic win at Spruce Meadows back in November. And obviously, it was a weird off-season because we did have those two big games in February against Pumas. But even since then, it's been, 6 or 7 weeks ago. So excited to see the season get underway and cover Cavalry again. And I'm expecting a good campaign overall. I think Cavalry, there's a lot of continuity from last year's championship winning team. And I know that other clubs have added some reinforcements. Cavalry has as well. But overall, I think it's going to be a pretty similar looking team to what fans saw in 2024.
It is unusual in the sense that so many returning players and, Cavalry has historically started slow. Right now, I would say with the returning roster and kind of the chemistry and continuity they have, if there's ever going to be a year where you think they wouldn't have their sluggish start, you'd think this would be it.
Yeah, and they're building off of those two games that I mentioned against very high caliber Mexican opposition. So their first game will be Saturday afternoon against Forge, which is perfect. It's a rematch of the final from November and the continuation of the league's best rivalry. Forge has added some really important, I think, pieces to their lineup, right? To their puzzle. They brought in Dan Nimick, who is one of Halifax's best players. They brought back Mo Babuli, who was playing very well last year for York. And they brought in Babuli's strike partner, Brian Wright from York, who was the Players' Player of the Year. So some really impressive signings made by Forge. And it'll be interesting to see how Cavalry competes against them at Hamilton Stadium, or whatever it's now called, since Tim Hortons is no longer the name sponsor.
Yeah, and this one's on TSN too.
Yeah, that's a really big deal. I think a lot of people over the years have been talking about the lack of, recognition for the CPL by the major broadcasters in Canada. So it's really nice to see how many games that TSN is going to broadcast. I think there's 4 in April alone. So,
and they now announced the schedule going further into May and I think even into June. And I think when I counted, there were 5 Cavalry matches listed in that bunch. So they're going to be a semi-regular team on that broadcast. Certainly there's some other teams which don't feature very much. I think Pacific is on there a couple times, and Vancouver FC, I think once or twice. I guess TSN is kind of leaning into some of the more marquee teams, Forge and Cavalry. So yeah, from our perspective, that works out really well.
Yeah, and it makes sense if you consider historically those have been the two strongest teams. So TSN wants to broadcast the best games possible, and they're going off of, I guess, history to determine which ones they thought that would be. But I mean, Jason, I mentioned some of the new signings for Forge. We should talk, of course, about Cavalry and who they've brought in, and maybe more importantly, who is left. Because we spoken a lot on our podcast about Daan Klomp, and he's a huge departure. But we just found out, I think it was like a week ago, that another key Cavalry guy is going to be no longer with the team moving forward.
Charlie Trafford retired, and I think it was a little bit surprising, just in the sense that he was playing in the Pumas matches, and then I think, sort of from my perspective at least, I thought, well, that means he's continuing on. If you're going to retire, you would have thought he would have done it at the end of the playoffs, but no. And I guess even in the press conference earlier today, and Scott, you were in on it, I think this was actually, I guess, the plan all along was for him to wrap up his career in these Pumas matches. So it was kind of an internally known thing, but I was surprised.
Yeah. And I was thinking, after I saw the post about him retiring, like, it's a cool way that he got to go out, right? Obviously lifting a trophy for Cavalry, his second one, if you consider that he was also on the team in 2023 that won the regular season CPL Shield. And then in his second last game of his career to score a goal against a Liga MX team. And then in his last game to be sent off, but then to have the red card rescinded after a VAR review. So very interesting way for Charlie Trafford to end his career and his time with Cavalry. Jason, we had him on, I guess it was over a year ago, and his is a great story, because he's one of those Calgarians who left to pursue a professional career overseas, but came back after Cavalry came into being and managed to enjoy some pretty big moments with the team and with one of his former coaches as well.
Yeah, and that trend has continued over the last several years, bringing back Bradley Camden-Fawo to Calgary, and also one of the new additions for this year, Kenije Alva. Kind of a similar story in a lot of ways.
Yeah, which is, it's neat, because I think some of those guys maybe wanted to wait and see how Cavalry shaped up, and after a few years, they're like, you know what? That looks like it would be a fun team to play for, and it would be a good team. So it makes sense in a way, I think. No, I think, you're absolutely right that I think the quality of Cavalry has been a factor in bringing players back home, which is great to see. Speaking of Charlie Trafford and his retirement, I was wondering if they were going to sign a central midfielder to replace him, and they just did that shortly after our interview with Tommy Wheeldon Jr. They announced the arrival of Michael Baldissimo, which is a pretty big signing in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty big get for them. He's been in MLS, like he hasn't, featured a lot, but he was most recently with San Jose, and a young guy, I think he's 24, something like that, plays for the Philippines national team. He's definitely going to find some minutes in the squad. And I think, I'm not completely sure how his game compares out to Trafford's, but, I think from a positional standpoint, it's somewhat of a similar like-for-like situation, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I'm like you. I haven't watched that much of Michael Baldissimo's play. Probably a couple of games from when he was on the Whitecaps, but I never did watch him play for San Jose. No, I mean, there's going to be some good, I think, battles for playing time in Cavalry's midfield if you consider the partnership of Schmidt Schoem and Diego Gutierrez and as the two deep lying midfielders. So for Michael Baldissimo to either try to break up that partnership and get the starting role there, or if he's going to push farther up the pitch and be more of like a playmaker or a number 10 almost. But big statement signing by Cavalry and evidence of the caliber of player that they can attract and entice to join their team.
We did our interview with Tommy Wheeldon Jr. on Tuesday afternoon, and the Baldissimo signing was announced on Wednesday. So we didn't cover that topic in the interview, but maybe we should actually run that interview now, and we can hear what Tommy had to say about some of the things we've already talked about and a few more things in addition to that.
Let's roll that interview now. I'd like to welcome Tommy Wheeldon Jr. to the podcast. As most of our listeners probably already know, Tommy is the head coach and general manager of Cavalry FC, and he's been a longtime pillar in the Calgary soccer community. Tommy, thanks for coming on our podcast again.
I know it's been a while, but glad to get going as we enter our 7th official season.
Yeah, and speaking of 7th official season with Cavalry FC, this is 7th preseason that the club has gone through. Can you talk a little bit about it? How's it gone? Obviously, there were 2 very marquee matches in there against tough opposition. How did that factor into the preparations for 2025?
Yeah, it's interesting. I told the players that this week. I said, going into this now being our 7th, and those that have been part of all 7, from Marco Carducci to Sergio Camargo that are still playing, to Jay Wheeldon and Nick Ledgerwood on the coaching side of the coin. No preseason has been the same. We've tried to do different stimulus. I think it's always nice when you have CONCACAF to prepare for, because it's a reward for the year before. And we said, look, for the success you get for being successful, or the reward you get for being successful, is more hard work. So our preseason's been a little longer. After we were knocked out by the Pumas, it was back to basics. Now we have 6 weeks. We give the boys a little bit of time off, and now we have 6 weeks to prepare for the regular season. So it's been really good experience, but the boys are itching now. You can tell, just almost like siblings, where they're chomping at the bit. They just want to compete, and I guess that's the championship mentality. Is you can only keep them in the stable for so long. You need to let them out, and they're ready to be let out.
Speaking of first matches of the year, your first opponent is a rematch of last year's final. How do you feel about that for a start of the season?
Love it. I think it brings the best and the worst probably out of both sides, because I think we've played each other more than any other 2 CPL sides have played against each other, and that's just because of the number of times we've met in playoffs, which, if you're doing that, it means you're having a good season. They've obviously made some new signings. We've made some changes in signings. I'm sure there'll be the similar type of DNA, but it's a brand new season. So what better way to kick it off than against one of the better teams in the league's history?
Absolutely. We're all looking forward to it. Have to ask you about the squad continuity. It's really a theme of the team this year, it seems. But of course, Cavalry has seen the departure of a very key player in Daan Klomp. So what do you think about the squad continuity? What are the pros and cons of that? And who do you see stepping in to fill that defensive leadership role?
Well, continuity and chemistry are hard to teach, because you have to stick with each other for a while to get that chemistry. Listen, losing Daan Klomp is always a tough one, because I think he's a very unique player. I don't think there's a player like him in the league, and I don't think there's a player like him that I've worked with. And I think it took us a couple of years actually to start getting the best out of him. And then he had back-to-back great years that ended up with us lifting trophies. We wish him the best as he embarks on his next one. And same with Charlie Trafford. Charlie Trafford was, somewhat of a cult hero with us, is returning home to finish his career, again, helping us lift trophies. These guys are special guys, and you can't replace them directly. I think I've felt like that with, when we've, lost players like Aaron Peppel, who's on a scoring streak, to, Maya Bevans, to Jose Escalantes that played 100 games for us. These guys all brought their own bit of medicine to it, but we always talk about leaving the jersey in a better place. So the fact that Charlie and Klompy can pass it over now on the back of 2 years of lifting silverware is great for them. But in doing so, now they create an opening for others to step up and lead. And much like they got the chance to, it's now a chance for others. In terms of who's ready to lead, well, we are actually younger than we've been. I think we have 7, possibly 8, if we include one of our youth sports picks, that are eligible for U21 minutes. And that's exceptional, because I've always liked as a coach is to have a team that has continuity, but also have this next generation. So you can make new signings that can make a difference, or you can develop your own. And I think last year was one of the few years we didn't sell a player. So there's actually still something there that we want to put players, young Canadian players, in the spotlight. So strategically, between Topher Fakunle and Jay and myself, we've been working on these next batch of youngsters to come in and supplement and complement our existing group.
It is 7 or 8 players that fall into that U21 category. In previous years, it's been right up to the deadline to get the required minutes, but this year definitely a younger squad. And so, how is that going to change your approach?
We always talk, even though when the minutes are given, the 2,000 minutes, we were always one of the best at producing, but not necessarily collecting the minutes. So every time we had a Gote and Tigney and Arabin Pepple or Victor Latore, even a Mo Farsi, they end up moving on because they've actually had to earn their minutes. So we're very selective with giving them game time. We don't just throw out and say, look, one of these games we're going to play 6, tick off the minutes, and then get on with our season. We actually still believe in, developing, I guess, the old school way where it's earned on the training ground. It's earned when they, get 5-10 minutes at the end of a game to getting a start in a next game, getting a start in preseason, coming off the bench in preseason. We talk to them all the time, and and credit to Nick and Jay, our coaching staff. They do a lot of individual development with them after training so that they're ready and they're prepared. So when we needed Michael Harms to play a couple of games last year away at York, who was a tough place to go, he was ready. To Nico Moroniak that played a bunch, to signing Jay Herdman permanently after the impact he made last year. And someone like Maël Henry, who we still feel is got a special amount of talent that we can get out of him. And then you start giving likes of Chan and Chanda a few more minutes here and there, and he plays a role similar to what Malcolm Shaw or Lowell Wright did for us last year. Is there's opportunity for them to gain them. So it's it takes time, but we're willing to give them the minutes, providing that they keep showing the character to play.
Thanks, Tommy. Of course, we want to ask you as well about the new signings that have been named in recent weeks or months, I guess. Kenija Elva, who's one that Jason and I have speculated for a while, local product, but we just heard about Mikhail Gerasimenkov recently. What do you think they'll bring to the squad this year?
Quality in two different ends of the spectrum. Kenija Elva is a player that obviously, like you guys, I've known, I've tracked, I've watched. He used to haunt a lot of my Calgary foothills teams when he was younger. And Scott, I'm sure you played against him a couple of times when he would play up. He was a special talent leaving here. He's developed a structure and a professional side to his game. But when you see him with St. Lucia, there's that little bit of freedom and maverick nature that he still has that comes out. And that was one of the conversations I had with him is, as he's now, he's had 9-10 years away somewhere else. Why not come home and have some fun and help us continue to grow this league? He's a Calgarian at heart because he's like me, being an immigrant, but being raised here. But he's talented. And like when I said about you can't replace Klompy directly, so you have to do it in different ways in a bit of a Moneyball system where can he add us that 6 to 8 goals from in the regular season that will help us. And I think he certainly will because he's shown flashes in Pumas. He's still working on getting back to match fit because he's been out of the game for 6 months. But the stuff he does in the training ground and around the locker room is excellent. And as it pertains to Mihail, he's somebody that we knew of. He came through the Blizzard system here before going to Whitecaps. We've tracked and monitored him. He's a from Moldova, but raised here in Calgary. And again, it's another one that's available to come for minutes. And I think when you give players that have been raised in the city an opportunity to play for the team in the city, you get that extra 5 or 10%. So we can then add in some exciting foreigners or imports from outside because you've got enough kind of Calgary lads or Alberta boys that are ready to bleed for the shirt.
Actually, I wanted to ask about Mihail. It's Mihail, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, Mihail Gerasimenkov. I've been practicing it.
Oh, I need to practice it. So is he a left back?
I'd say his best position is left wing back. So what that gives us is a chance to have more of an attack minded. Brad Camden is one of the best, if not the best, shutdown defenders in this league. And I think what he does, he can provide us that. He can go forward and join the attack from time to time as well. We've seen that. But what Mihail gives us is a different element that, we noticed a lot of teams last year sitting low blocks. Great, let's add an extra attacker. So it's not always Fraser Ed on the opposite side. Maybe it's him on the left side that gives us delivery, service, energy, 1v1 capability. So he's very exciting in that way. And I think that's a role that we'll use him in moving forward.
It's a big year for Spruce Meadows, their 50th anniversary coming up. We've seen the kit revealed, the secondary kit pays homage to that. But how will Cavalry celebrate that milestone for its ownership group?
Well, we got them an early gift last year by getting the gold patch on the back of the jerseys this year so that it matched the gold stripes on the Spruce Meadows jersey. And it was interesting. Funny, one of the conversations I had with Ian Allison was that when we were designing the kits, we designed them a year before. And we talked about what a wonderful way to celebrate everything together. Because Spruce Meadows, listen, we're fortunate. with Linda Southern Heathcott, the whole Southern Heathcott family. Like they're incredible with us because they give us such a setting to play in. They give us such support to be the best versions of ourselves. So when we're talking about how can we pay homage, one, let's put more silverware in the trophy cabinet. In doing so, get that gold crest. But two, the jersey itself, there's class. And that you always feel that when you walk through Spruce Meadows, and whether it's the red and green of the Cavalry or whether it's the green of the international ring and around Spruce Meadows, there's just a regalness about the whole organization. So we tried our very best to be able to provide that in the jersey that fans and supporters and players alike will all enjoy wearing.
We talked already about, having a lot of continuity and you have this group of players that you've had, for a while, and, you won won a trophy last year. And so what are the goals this year? What are the motivating things for this year? Like what can we look for as far as what your expectations are for the club?
Well, success is addicting. We used that saying last year, going through the pain to taste the champagne. The trophy that we hadn't won yet within the league was the playoff championship. Reality is it's so hard to win the regular season given the enormity of it, the 28 games in coast to coast. We won 2 good games back to back when the pressure was at its highest against an opponent that has, been our nemesis. But we found a way. And I think that's the wonderful thing that we've shown as a football club is our perseverance, our resilience, and our quality is coming through. So, what do these players want? I said at the start of this conversation, they want to compete again. They want to chase a trophy. They want to progress in the CAN champ. They've seen the draw that it's a great opportunity to advance in that and maybe be the first CPL team to lift that trophy. So there's lots of things, after coming out of CONCACAF, we're so, it was bittersweet because we felt we'd, made history by beating them and we lost by 1 goal, but we had 1 man less. But the lads were just disappointed in getting knocked out of that competition, even though it wasn't our season, our time of year. So now we have 3 trophies to chase. And I said, it's addicting. So we want to do that and do things that haven't been done before.
So Tommy, the last time the team played at Spruce Meadows, it was in front of more than 7,000 fans. Personally, I'm expecting a lot of fan interest in the team this year, given the success of last year. And I think every year people are discovering Cavalry for the first time. So what's your message to both new incoming Cavalry fans and as well as those who've been with the club since the start?
I think you're spot on. It's growing organically. Spruce Meadows, Linda's given us that great place to play. It's a phenomenal atmosphere. The foot soldiers and all the other supporters groups are great. I think it's great because you got the family section, you got foot soldiers section, you got that mingle in between and the 109s. I don't think there's an atmosphere like it. I've not seen it. We can say it's very similar to a European stage or stadium. You can say it's similar to this group or that group. I think it's so unique. I think when people do come for the first time, they come back. So new supporters to it. And that's the great thing about our season ticket holders. They're starting to bring their +1 for people to experience it. They come back. And it's seeing the kids now around the streets that are wearing it or coming out to the supporters groups wearing their kit or wearing, a Camargo on the back or a Musi on the back or a Carducci. These young men that play for the team are giving these young people in our city heroes to watch live. And that's what keeps inspiring these players to keep making new history and make sure that this club is around a lot longer than when we retire.
Thanks once again to Tommy Wheeldon Jr. for doing the interview with us this week. Anything that he talked about, there were a lot of interesting things, I guess we could go over, but anything sort of you want to comment on first, at least?
Definitely the emphasis on youth. That was a good thing he had to say about putting his faith in the players, in the U21 players this year. Yeah, definitely Cavalry's youngest team, right? I think their average age is 24, 25. They do have some experience in the form of guys who are 27, 28, but they only have 3 players over the age of 30. And actually, I can't even say over the age of 30 because all 3 of those are 30, those being Sergio Camargo, Fraser Aird, and Bradley Cameron Bayo. But yeah, what is it, 8 or 9 U21 players this season? Granted, not all of them are going to play regularly, but you have to assume that some of them are going to get some pretty considerable minutes. And this is something we haven't necessarily seen from Cavalry in previous seasons.
One thing I thought about in the interview, when you talk about the emphasis on youth, one thing we've kind of speculated on is, Malcolm Shaw, Lowell Wright, both not returning to the club this year, and the team hadn't really signed anybody else up front to sort of take those minutes. Now, admittedly, neither one of those players, had massive amounts of minutes, but it sounds like the stage is set for Chanan Chanda to have the opportunity to get those minutes.
Yeah. I mean, he's still very young, but he did look pretty energetic and hungry in the games that he did play. And in his cameos, he was usually coming on in the 75th, 80th minute or whatever. Definitely expect to see more of him in 2025. And there's a few others as well who you and I have previously talked about who we think will get more playing time. Nico Moroniak is one, but Michael Harms as well. Although, he's taking on Fraser Aird really for a role in the starting 11. But yeah, I think with his speed, he's going to be a potent weapon on the wing for Cavalry.
And another thing I just mentioned, because, I always enjoy talking about roster composition and that sort of thing. As we're recording this on Thursday evening, I don't think they have announced yet officially who the U Sports players are going to be, but I think Tommy had alluded to the fact that one of the three players would qualify as a U21 player. So Owen Antoniuk and Harvey Hughes are both over 21. So I think they would be two of those players, and Max Pipegrass, I would expect, is going to be the third one. So I don't really anticipate, massive amounts of minutes for any of them right off the bat, for sure. But I think that will be the last piece of the roster for now, at least, although they do have one extra slot available, and there's still probably some need to fill in some depth at center back. Don't you think? They don't really have anybody else. If they have an injury to Cobbs or Montgomery, it could be a problem.
Yeah. I think we've talked about Tom Field being able to play at center back, but I do think he prefers to play left back. But yeah, I mean, Eric Cobbs and Cal Montgomery both played really well against Pumas, but you want, I think, at least one more player in that position. And, it would definitely not hurt if it's a player who brings a similar resume or caliber that Daan Klomp did, right? So big shoes to fill, but I think that is the position that right now has the most question marks on it.
A couple other things to talk about, I guess, about Cavalry, and some of it was alluded to in the interview as well. What do you think of the new kit, the green kit?
Yeah. So I asked this question. So Spruce Meadows, I think later this month, maybe only a week or two from now, they're celebrating their 50th anniversary, and Cavalry, to mark that occasion, came out with a kind of dark green away kit. I really like it. I like it more than the home kit, which is saying something because I'm usually not a big fan of away kits compared to the home kits. But no, I really like it. It's dark green and it's got 7, what do you call them, vertical stripes going down it to kind of commemorate each year that Cavalry has been in existence. But I really like the away kit. The home kit I'm a little less enthusiastic about, but I really liked last year's red one, so it was always going to be tough for this year's to top that, in my opinion.
Couple other things, I guess, that we probably would want to talk about with the club. Also today, they announced the club announced Tobias Warschewski has a contract extension.
Yeah, he's going to be here for another 2 years, and I think Cavalry fans will be very pleased to see this news, considering his season last year. Obviously, he was the CPL's top scorer, and I think if you go over, if you go back, I don't think that there's a forward that Cavalry has had as good as Toby Warschewski. I think he's the best number 9 that they've had, and I call him that, but every time we've talked to him and in a lot of the media interviews and press conferences, he likes to remind people that he's not an out-and-out number 9. He likes to drop deep. He likes to drift wide. He likes to get involved with the play, and we've seen the impact that can have on Cavalry's offense. So, yeah, really good contract extension for Cavalry. Obviously, he's a very talented player.
And you were in on the press conference earlier today, and he was being interviewed. So we have some audio from that. So we'll run that now.
Yeah, it means a lot. From the first day when I got here, I felt like a family, and everybody welcomed me very well. And for me, it was not like a long decision to sign a new deal. I feel very comfortable here, and want to have more success with the team together. I think we have team goals for sure. We want to have success this year as well. But personally, for me, I want to keep the standards high. I want to be able to have a season like I had last year, this year again, and believing in myself that I can do that even more than last year. And we figured the system out where everybody was comfortable in. Like I'm not a really natural number 9. Or I like to drop deep in pockets, and I feel like I got the freedom for it. And play my game and help the team like in the way I play the game, and I feel like here I got a role where I can show what I can do. Yeah, we have for sure confidence after CONCACAF, but we know also yeah, it's a long season, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Like I think we ready for that. We have the players for that, and yeah, just excited to start the season after this 4 months of kind of preseason with in and out like competition and then preseason again. We just all I think happy to start the season right now. Yeah, I feel very comfortable in the front line. I think we add good quality to the group up front, and um, I think hopefully we score this year more goals than last year. And I think with the weapons we got, we're capable of, and we need to put it into the games. And yeah, I think here the mentality is every time the same. We in an environment where like we get from day one, we want to win titles. We won titles like for example with Can Champ, no CPL team won the Can Champ. Like goals like that. Like I think we hungry for titles, and we know how it feels now. To win a title. Like even me myself, and you get even hungry for more. If I'm being honest, this feeling after winning the North Star Cup was an amazing feeling, and I want to have this feeling again this year. I was already after the season, like kind of talks with Tommy and Tofa, and for me was only one thing. I wanted to sign a longer deal, and that was my head at, and glad it worked out. It was a little bit tough with Tofa and Tommy sometimes, but we made it work, and I'm happy now. It was a long preseason, if I'm being honest, and like to come like with the CONCACAF going into competition, everything is like competition again, and then I have a drop off kind of after like falling short in CONCACAF. Having preseason again, it's like sometimes for like you came just out of competition was like kind of a roller coaster. And yeah, it was just needed. I'm just happy that the season starts off like everybody knows the start of the season where everybody is at, and figure things out like what we need to improve on, or uh, like yeah, I love to compete, and I think it's just needed that the season starts right now.
One more roster and I wanted to add in. Did you see the Scott? Warschewski and Tom Field are Canadian now.
Yeah, this is kind of an interesting roster rule change that's happening league wide. I didn't actually sorry, I didn't actually read up on it. I just saw that they're now considered Canadians. But can you speak more to this?
Well, you know what? Now that I'm on the spot here, I don't remember the exact details, but it's something to the effect that if you've been in the league for at least 3 years or something like that, qualify not as an import anymore.
Yeah.
So there was a list of players that were considered to be qualified for the season and there was about a dozen players, all players that you would have heard their names before, throughout the league, guys who have been around for several years, and both their names were on it. So it's not like Cavalry was right up against the max number of imports that they were allowed, but they don't have to count either of these players at this point. Yeah. So it's interesting to see how some of these roster rules evolve. And I know that even, I've been paying a lot of attention to the Australian A-League because of my travels, and they have a similar rule. If you've been in the league, and I think it's maybe even longer than 3 years, but it's the same thing. You don't count as an import after a certain period of time. So
I always thought it was interesting. I remember in the inaugural year, Jay Wheeldon was considered a domestic player. And I always just thought that was interesting because, you hear him talk in his British accent and stuff, but he qualified as a local. Obviously, he'd been in Canada a long time.
Hi, this is Tegan Stewart. You're listening to YYC Soccer Podcast.
All right, Jason, talking about Calgary's other professional soccer team, the Wild, very close to kicking off their inaugural season, just under 2 weeks until their first game. Obviously, it's going to be a bit longer than that before we can see them play at McMahon Stadium. That home opener is not until May 11th. But we pretty much have a full roster now with, I think it's 22 players named to the team.
Actually, we got 23 now. Today, right before we went to air here, the last 23rd member was announced. So it's the roster limit is 23 and all slots are filled.
The final signings came thick and fast in these last 2 weeks. I think since our last episode, we recently heard, Danielle Steer has joined the team. She's a UBC grad from Vancouver, plays as a forward. Jackie Burns, Northern Ireland, third goalkeeper named to the team. Madison Wilson, London, Ontario, recent University of Iowa grad, and I think a few others as well.
One that was a bit interesting to me is that Sarah Griffith is an American player. She's coming on loan from the Chicago Red Stars in the NWSL. We've seen a few of these loans now for players that are being loaned out by NWSL teams.
Yeah, Maya Jones to AFC Toronto from San Diego Wave is another one. There's been some other interesting stuff from the Wild if you follow them on social media. Did you notice that they did that white hat ceremony at Ranchman's recently to officially welcome the team?
Yeah, and they did some dancing and stuff. I did see that when I was away, and yeah, that's kind of cool. They've definitely done a really good job as an organization when it comes to sort of the PR and then the media hits and stuff like that. They've definitely captured a fair amount of attention, and they've been doing some cool things too.
Jason, I guess we can talk about the jersey and our thoughts. Overall, I mean, it's kind of what we expected, purple with red trim, but overall, I wasn't too impressed by the details on it. What did you think?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. I really like the color scheme and the logo and all the other branding, but yeah, I don't know. It just feels a little bit maybe plain to me. When I look at a couple of the other ones, I really like that Vancouver jersey. I think that one's a really, really nice one. But I really like that purple color. I think it's a real winner. So at least that's prominently featured on it. So I think that's definitely a point in favor.
True. I'd like to see what short and sock combo they have with it. I think that could change how I feel about it. But from a distance, yeah, you can't really see any of the intricacies of the actual kit. It just looks like a deep purple, which it isn't. If you get a closer up view, you can see some of the design, but from far away you can't. But it would have been nice if we could also see the shorts. I think if you had like a white pair of shorts and then purple socks, it would be a nice kit. It kind of reminds me of Fiorentina in Italy. They're full purple, I think purple, and this could be purple, white, black, or purple, white, white. We'll have to wait and see what else they have. I don't know why they didn't do a full kit reveal though.
It seems like they didn't do it for any of the clubs. I haven't seen a full kit reveal for anybody, so I have a feeling it might not even all be ready yet. But we're going to see it soon enough. The first match is really in a week and a half, or just under 2 weeks. So next week we'll spend a bit more time talking about the upcoming season. But yeah, it's finally coming together, and it's happening
really soon. Yeah, and there was actually a media availability at McMahon Stadium last week. I wasn't assigned to this, Jason, but the Herald did do a story about it. So if you're curious and you want to see a photo of what McMahon looks like right now, Herald has you covered. There's going to be no football lines during the Wild games, which I think is a relief for everybody.
Hi, this is Tobias Warschewski. You're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
A bunch of short topics we want to talk about that have sort of come up over the last couple weeks and thought they were worth mentioning. First thing we were going to mention was the Canadian women's U17 team is currently in the CONCACAF championship right now, trying to qualify for the U17 World Cup. And there is some Calgary representation on this squad.
Yeah, no surprise to see Kaylee Hunter involved, but there's also a player named Tora Betteridge who plays with Whitecaps Elite Academy, and she's a University of Michigan commit. But yeah, 2 Calgarians and Canadians off to a pretty impressive start.
Yeah, and that first match they played Nicaragua, they won 5-0, and Kaylee Hunter scored a really nice goal, the third goal of the match.
Yeah, the Panama game ended just a few hours before we started recording. 2-0 win for Canada. And both Kaylee Hunter and Tora Betteridge played in this game. Kaylee Hunter got subbed off, but looks like Tora played the full 90 at center back.
Yeah, so they've got one more match against Puerto Rico on Sunday, but it's definitely looking like they're putting themselves in a good position to make it to the U17 World Cup. So good for them. It's interesting. With Kaylee Hunter, she's been a somewhat important part of the U20 club, but she also qualifies still to play for U17. So I guess that just shows you sort of the level that she's at, even right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and it's funny to think that we probably brought her up for the first time when she was still only 15, right? So I think she's one to watch for the future. I think she's absolutely going to play for the women's national team, maybe even in a couple of years.
I think the sky's the limit for her right now, and all signs point to she could be a really important player for Canada in the future. And we also want to talk about a couple of Calgarians who have recently signed pro deals. First one we'll mention is former podcast guest Adam Huskic signed with the East Coast Bays in New Zealand. Last year he was in New Zealand with a different club, and very early in the season he tore his ACL. So it's good to see him back on the pitch and playing. I know that they've already played the first couple of matches and he's played in them. And I also found out too that you can watch all of their matches on FIFA Plus, that FIFA Plus app. So I might actually try and check that out here over the next couple of weeks. So good to see him back in action. And another player, which we haven't really talked about, he's been a Calgarian who's been playing pro in a couple different locations, but Daan Domich, he signed with Texoma.
Yes, who are in USL League One. So not very far away and decent level, definitely. Daan Domich, former Mount Royal University Cougar, U Sports Rookie of the Year back in, I think, 2019. And I think he was a trialist with Cavalry in 2019 in the inaugural season, or on the preseason roster. But yeah, I mean, he's been playing professionally at various levels over the years since then. And he's not that far away with Texoma.
So here's my question for you, Scott. Where is Texoma?
Well, my first guess is in Texas.
Yeah. It's a town that I've never heard of before, and I can't even tell you the name of it right now, but it's not a very large place. But the thing that makes it notable is it's just on the Texas side of the Texas-Oklahoma border. That's why that area is called Texoma.
Oh, cool. Okay, because I just Googled it, and it's called Sherman.
Yeah, and it's not a big place. It's really quite a small place, I think.
Yeah, 43,000, which by Texas standards is basically a small town. But I see it on the map here. It's right on the northern tip of Texas. So interesting place to end up for sure.
and they're an expansion team, and I don't know anything about them, but it seems to me that there must be some really motivated, committed owners there, starting in such a small market. But anyway, yeah, good on them, and we'll follow along and see how everything goes for them down there.
Just 3 more things to briefly mention before we end this week's episode. Thought I'd give a shout out to the Foot Soldiers, who just last week celebrated a pretty big, impressive milestone, Jason.
Yeah, 10 years. It's crazy to think about that. Pretty humble beginnings, and started out with basically a handful of people, and cheering on Foothills and the PDL days. I think it was still called PDL back then. They've really evolved, and it's been really cool to watch over the years, because I remember going all the way back to the beginning, when there was I don't know, half a dozen of them that would be at Foothills matches.
Yeah, it's a really cool origin story. 6 soccer fans met at the Fiddler's Courtyard. I think it was March 28th or 29th, 2015. Just because they knew that a PDL team was coming, and they thought that they would go to watch the games and cheer the team on together and try to create a little bit of a European vibe at those games. And we've had Sean Clark on the podcast, talked about some of the other members of the Foot Soldiers, and yeah, it has grown organically since then, and is now one of the most recognizable supporters groups in Canadian soccer. So really impressive what they've been able to create this last decade, and I think it's going to continue to grow in the next decade.
Definitely. There's also some news about the Alberta Soccer and their female coaching clinic they recently.
Yeah, they recently hosted the She Can Coach clinic in Edmonton, and this Saturday, or is it Sunday? Saturday, they're going to be hosting the same thing in Calgary all afternoon. So that's great to see. And then on another, I guess, grassroots level, we can talk quickly about the CMSA holding its inaugural March Mayhem tournament, which I think Carlo Bruno mentioned when we had him on not that long ago.
He did.
Big tournament to end off the indoor season. 140 teams, most of which were from Calgary, but the tournament did have some out of town representation. U10 to U19. So looks like that was a success, and I imagine it'll probably continue in the years to come.
You think we hit everything today, Scott? I think that was a pretty decent catch up.
Yeah, obviously, there's a lot to go over when you don't record for a couple of weeks, but it's also a busy time of the calendar for soccer. Obviously, the outdoor season is right on our doorstep, so it's good to be back, and it's good to chat with you about these things again.
Definitely. We didn't have time for my Brisbane Roar game report.
No. I'll have to do that. We'll have to do that later, I guess.
Oh yeah. I think it can easily not make the episode, but I did actually catch an Australian A-League game when I was on holiday, and yeah, it was pretty interesting. But we'll leave it at that. Thank you for listening to the YLSC Soccer Podcast. You can have this podcast downloaded to your device as soon as it becomes available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or other podcasting platforms. Check out our website at ylscsoccer.com, where you can look through our episode archive and find other options to listen, including our YouTube channel. We also have links on our website on how to buy Scott's book. You can leave a question or comment in the Contact Us section of our website. You can also interact with us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, where our username is YYC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.